Thank you, Josh. Alrighty, I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Okay. Alrighty, let's make that bigger. I'm going to share it like that just because I'm going to use a couple of my notes towards the end of this presentation. Okay. Alrighty, so my name is Jasmine Alvarez, as Josh just mentioned, and I am going to be giving a presentation today about healthy eating and specifically discussing the healthy relationship with food in times of temptation and stress. All right, so I am a registered dietitian and I got my bachelor's here at Texas State University in nutrition and foods. I then worked for 2 years in community nutrition, and now I am back at Texas State to finish my master's degree. And I'm going to graduate with my master's next spring, but until then, I have been enjoying being the WellCats nutrition graduate assistant so that I can give awesome presentations like these. Okay, so before we start talking about having a healthy relationship with food in times of temptation and stress, I'm first going to kind of go over what is healthy eating to begin with. So I like to base my definition of healthy eating off of the 2015-2020 Dietary Guidelines for Americans, which are science-based, evidence-based guidelines used to create food and nutrition policies and practices on healthy eating, so like at schools, hospitals, etc. These guidelines provide recommendations for food and beverage choices for overall healthy eating patterns, and they are jointly published by the United States Department of Agriculture, so the USDA, and the United States Department of Health and Human Services. And we're getting new 2020-2025 dietary guidelines pretty soon here, so hopefully they're on their way before the end of the year. Okay, so overall, healthy eating focuses on variety, nutrient density, and amount. In a healthy eating pattern, we should choose to eat a variety of foods across and within all different food groups, and I'll go over those in just a bit. We should choose foods that are nutrient dense, or in other words, they have large amounts of beneficial nutrients like vitamins, minerals, proteins, and healthy fats, as well as carbohydrates. And we should eat foods in all groups in recommended amounts. So not too much and not too little of each different food group. Alrighty, so having a healthy eating pattern is important for a number of reasons. So currently, approximately half of Americans have one or more preventable chronic disease, such as type 2 diabetes, heart disease, or obesity. And studies have shown that adults who eat healthy diets live longer and have lower risks of all these chronic diseases. Obesity can be caused by genetic predisposition or a hormone imbalance, but it is very often caused by unhealthy eating patterns and physical inactivity. Heart disease may also stem from imbalanced dietary intake of fats, such as like eating too many of those bad fats and too little of those good fats, and we'll go over those in just a little bit as well as eating a really high intake of refined carbohydrates and sugars. Additionally, type 2 diabetes can also be caused by having way too high of a refined carb intake and a high intake of sugars. So healthy eating has been shown to manage or prevent all of these conditions. Okay, so food groups that we should include are fruits, vegetables, grains, dairy, proteins, and oils. And for vegetables specifically, we should be eating the rainbow. I'm sure y'all have heard of that before. That's basically just saying that we should be eating a variety of dark and light green vegetables, orange, yellow, blue, purple, dark and light red vegetables as well. And we should do that every single day. Then for fruits, we should be eating whole fruits especially, but frozen fruits and canned fruits, ones that are canned in their own juices, are also really good options. We should be eating grains, at least half of which are 100% whole grains, and we're going to talk about each of these super specifically in just a second. We should be eating low-fat or fat-free dairy options like milk, yogurt, and cheese. And we should be eating protein foods like meats, poultry, eggs, beans, and peas, as well as nuts, seeds, and soy products. And finally, we should eat healthy plant oils that are liquids at room temperature. And we'll go over the difference between plant oils and other oils in just a little bit. Okay, so first we're going to talk about vegetables, which is my personal favorite food group. So just as I mentioned, a healthy eating pattern includes a variety of vegetables from all vegetable subgroups. We should be eating the rainbow, like this beautiful pan of vegetables that you can see in the picture. Vegetables can be eaten fresh, frozen, canned, or dried, and you should eat approximately 2.5 to 3 cups of vegetables a day. They have lots of beneficial nutrients like vitamins, such as vitamin A from red and orange vegetables, vitamin C, vitamin K from those dark leafy vegetables like kale, spinach, etc., vitamin E, B6, folate, thiamine, and niacin. They also have lots of minerals, potassium, copper, magnesium, iron, and manganese. And they also are really good sources of choline and dietary fiber. Now moving down to the consideration section, vegetables should be consumed in their nutrient-dense forms with limited additions of salt, butter, and cream sauces. I know that those kind of packages of frozen vegetables that are garlicky, buttery, they sure do taste delicious, but they may not be the best healthy option. So as whole and nutrient-dense as possible. And then also when selecting frozen or canned vegetables, they should be lower in sodium. So look for items that specifically say no salt added or low sodium. Now for the fruits, also a beautiful display of rainbow fruits in the picture. So healthy eating patterns do include fruits, especially whole fruits, but they can also be frozen, canned, or even dried. We should be eating about 1.5 to 2 cups of fruit per day. And 1 cup of fruit juice actually does count as 1 cup of fruit, but it should be noted that fruit juice is generally lower in dietary fiber, so whole fruits are the preferred option. And then additionally, 1/2 cup of dried fruit can count as a 1 cup equivalent of the fruit, but those are generally more expensive than whole fruit, so always kind of opt for the whole fruit option. Fruits are a really good source of vitamin C, potassium, and dietary fiber. So they have all different sorts of beneficial nutrients in there. And some things to consider are that when buying a fruit juice, look for packages that say 100% fruit juice or 100% pineapple, 100% apple, because they can often be mixed with lots of kind of added sugars in there, or they can be just 50% juice and 50% water with sugar. So they're going to taste good, but they're not going to give you all those kind of benefits that normal 100% fruit juice would have. They're also generally a little bit higher in calories. Now moving on to grains. So a healthy eating pattern also includes whole grains and limited intake of refined grains. Grains can be eaten as single foods, so think things like rice, oatmeal, bulgur, etc. Or they can be in grain-based foods, so like breads, cereals, crackers, and pasta. We should eat approximately 6-ounce equivalents of grains per day. And I know everyone immediately is just like, what does that mean? So that is approximately, think like 1 slice of bread would be 1 ounce. 1 tortilla would be 1 ounce. 1/2 cup of rice or 1/2 cup of pasta would also be 1 ounce. So if you are confused about that for whatever reason, feel free to reach out to me and I can give you lots of examples of ounce equivalents. But 6 is pretty much the goal. And then we should also have a goal of consuming at least half of our grains as whole grains. And that is a minimum of half. Feel free to eat 100% of your day as whole grains. Whole grains have vitamins like folate, thiamine, niacin, B6, riboflavin, and vitamin D. They also have minerals like iron, zinc, manganese, magnesium, copper, phosphorus, and selenium, so lots of minerals in there. And then whole grains are also a really good source of dietary fiber. For the consideration sections, I just wanted to, or section, I just wanted to inform you a little bit about the differences between enriched and fortified foods. I know we see those sometimes on packages and not a lot of us even know what that means. So enriched foods are when nutrients that are lost during processing, so things that were naturally occurring in that food are lost during processing, and then they're added back into that food. So for example, that'd be like adding in the B vitamins back into a refined grain product because they were lost during processing otherwise. And then fortified foods are when new nutrients are added into the food. So that would be the example of adding folic acid into a whole grain cereal. And if you're going to eat refined grains, then you should definitely try to look for those enriched or fortified versions of those foods. Alrighty, moving on to dairy. A healthy eating pattern includes fat-free and low-fat, so 1% dairy options. These can be milk, yogurt, cheese, or fortified soy products for those who are either allergic to dairy or follow kind of special dairy-free diets. For children, 2 to 3, they should eat about 2 cups or consume 2 cups of dairy each day, while children 4 to 8 should consume 2.5 cups. And then for 9, all the way through adulthood for the rest of your life, you should try to eat approximately 3 cups of dairy each day. And that's just to make sure that you're getting all of those beneficial nutrients like vitamin A, vitamin D, riboflavin, vitamin B12, as well as the minerals, calcium, phosphorus, potassium, zinc, magnesium, selenium, and protein and choline. I specifically, and the dietary guidelines specifically recommend the fat-free and the low-fat dairy options because they just have less saturated fat and sodium than the higher fat options. And we're going to go over exactly what that benefit is in just a little bit. And they also have more potassium, vitamin A, and vitamin D. So we should try to choose those low-fat or fat-free options. Additionally, people with lactose intolerance should choose low lactose or lactose-free dairy products, which are available, or they can just use soy products if they choose to go kind of more plant-based. Now for proteins. So a healthy dietary pattern includes a variety of protein foods from both animal and plant sources. We should eat approximately 5.5-ounce equivalents of protein foods per day. So for reference, 1-ounce slice of kind of lunch meat is about 1 ounce. And then protein foods have tons of beneficial nutrients. So things like vitamin B12, D, E, vitamin E specifically from things like nuts and seeds, and then niacin from poultry products, as well as iron and zinc, magnesium, copper, phosphorus, and selenium. And then protein foods are obviously very protein rich, and they have omega-3 fatty acids if you're eating fish products, and then choline if you're eating eggs. We should aim to eat about 8-ounce equivalents of seafood per week. So I always like to give the example, 4 ounces is about the size of a deck of cards. So if you can just imagine a deck of cards, if you choose a piece of meat or fish in this case, about that size, that's gonna be 4 ounces. If you eat 2 of those per week, you eat your 8-ounce equivalents of seafood per week. And that's just so that you can get all the benefits of the omega-3 fatty acids, as well as all that high protein goodness. And then a 1/2 ounce of nuts and seeds is about a 1-ounce equivalent of protein foods, and those should be unsalted. Again, the nuts give a lot of that vitamin E, which is something that's not normal in protein, like meats and all that other good stuff. And then we should choose lean forms of meats and poultry instead of the higher fat options, because the higher fat options generally have a lot of that saturated fat, which we'll go over in a second. And then processed meats and poultry like sausages, hot dogs, even some lunch meats contain lots of sodium and saturated fats. So watch out for those when you can. Okay, now some oils. So our final food group to include is oils. So healthy plant-based oils specifically. We should choose to consume oils that are high in monosaturated and polysaturated fats, which means they will be liquid at room temperature. So examples of these include canola, olive, peanut, walnut, avocado, safflower, soybean, and sunflower oils. I give you a ton of options there. And we should limit or completely avoid oils like coconut oil, palm kernel oil, and palm oil, all of which are saturated fats. So those are going to be those solids at room temperature. Oils are naturally present in nuts, seeds, seafood, olives, avocados, and they are extracted from these foods and then bottled, and we make them into delicious dressings or use them to oil up our pans. We should eat approximately 27 grams, which is about 5 teaspoons of oils a day. Oils are really good sources of vitamin E, like I just mentioned, those nuts and seeds earlier in the protein category, and of essential fatty acids, so things like omega-3s and omega-6s. However, it should be considered that oils are very concentrated sources of calories, so they shouldn't be added into our diet. We should just replace our solid fats with oils instead. Alrighty. So now that we've kind of talked about all the foods that we should include in our diets, I'm just going to briefly go over things that we should try to limit as much as possible. So these foods include things like saturated and trans fats, foods with lots of added sugars, and foods with lots of sodium. And we're going to go into the specifics of each of these categories in the following slides. Okay, so starting with saturated and trans fats. There is actually no dietary requirement to eat saturated fats, so it's not something that we're supposed to be eating really. The goal right now is to consume less than 10% of your calories a day in the form of saturated fats. So for example, if your caloric needs are about 2,000 calories a day, and everyone's going to be different, but I'm just giving this as an example. If they're about 2,000 calories a day, that would mean you consume right at or below 22 grams of saturated fat per day. And those, saturated fat amounts of a lot of foods, especially labeled foods like with Nutrition Facts Panel, it's very clearly spelled out how many grams of saturated fat that food has per serving. Or if it's like something like chicken and it doesn't really come with the Nutrition Facts Panel, feel free to just give it a quick Google. Google's generally an okay source of nutrition information, specifically for like gram amounts of stuff. So give it a Google and see what it says. And then some of the main sources of saturated fats are going to be those processed mixed dishes containing things like cheese, meat, or both of them. So things like hamburgers, sandwiches, even tacos, pizza, pasta dishes, all the things that are really rich generally have a lot of those saturated fats in them. So moving on to the health implications, saturated fats play super important physiological roles in our body, but our bodies make plenty, so we don't actually need to eat them. Saturated fats in our diet should be replaced with those oils, so like the polyunsaturated and the monounsaturated fats, like the plant oils we just talked about. And then swapping saturated fats for oils can result in reduced total cholesterol levels, as well as LDL cholesterol levels, which generally are a little bit higher in the American population. And then they can also, like making that swap can also help reduce the number of cardiovascular disease kind of events, so heart attacks and stuff like that, as well as cardiovascular disease related deaths. So all of this information is for saturated fats. And then the info on trans fats is even more simple, which is just avoid them as much as possible. There's no good that comes from trans fats. So if any of those packages say that they have trans fats, I would limit that food as much as possible. And then also things like fried foods have a little bit more of those trans fats. So just limit them as much as possible. I'm not saying no more fried foods, just limited. Moving on. Okay, so added sugars. The next foods to limit are those that have lots of added sugars. So the goal is to consume less than 10% of your calories from added sugars. So basically the exact same as the saturated fats. So for this one, if you need 2,000 calories a day, that would be eating something like at or less than 50 grams of added sugar per day. And again, that'll tell you on your beverages, on your foods. If you look at the nutrition facts panel, there's a special line that specifically says added sugars. You want to limit those to the 50, no more than 50 grams per day. The main sources of added sugars are things like syrups and other caloric sweeteners, especially added to sugar sweetened beverages. So like sodas, the juices that I was talking about earlier that aren't actually juices, snacks and sweets and stuff like that. Examples of added sugars specifically are brown sugar, corn sweeteners like high fructose corn syrup, dextrose, fructose, glucose. They go by so many names. I just added this whole list so that you can kind of look for those if you wanted to look through the ingredients. The main thing I want you to take away from the slide though is just looking at the nutrition facts panel at the added sugar line, make sure that it's not going to be over this 50 grams per day. And then lower intake of added sugars is associated with reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, and even sometimes some types of cancer. Also, it should be noted that replacing added sugars with 0-calorie sweeteners like diet options of foods and drinks may reduce the caloric intake of just calories and then added sugar in the short term, but there is a lot of conflicting evidence as to what the long-term benefit of this strategy is. So I would not just rely on diet things unless you have something like type 2 diabetes and you need to eat less of those added sugars. The overall takeaway is just to limit those added sugars as much as possible to no more than 10% of your calories per day. Now, sodium. So we should limit foods that have lots of sodium in them. The daily goal is to consume less than or right at the 2,300 milligrams per day. Again, nutrition facts panels are super helpful and tell you exactly how much sodium is per serving. A further reduction to 1,500 milligrams per day has shown to have even additional health benefits, but if you're like me, that is very hard to do because almost everything that we eat has sodium in it, usually 300 plus milligrams per serving. So it's really hard to get to that 1,500 milligrams, but there are tons of health benefits if you're able to do that. The main sources of sodium are things like added salt, especially in mixed dishes like burgers, sandwiches, tacos, all the ones that I previously discussed. Sodium is essential in our body. We use it everywhere in our body, but almost all foods naturally have sodium in them. So even fruits and vegetables and grains, they have sodium already in them, and usually in quantities that we'd be able to fully thrive off of that. So we really don't need all that added salt. Unless we're extreme athletes and we're sweating a ton. But that's a whole other conversation. And then increased sodium intake has been associated with increased blood pressure and increased risk of cardiovascular disease in adults, while decreased sodium intake has been associated with decreased blood pressure overall. Okay. So now that we kind of completed our discussion about what is a healthy eating pattern, we're now going to move on to the barriers to healthy eating and tips to overcome those barriers. Okay, so before we started that, I wanted to go over the stress response to eating. When we experience stress in any form, in the short term, we have a decreased appetite. And that's due to the hormone epinephrine, which is responsible for our fight or flight response. So in that moment of short-term stress, our body is so preoccupied with dealing with that stress that eating is the very last thing on our minds. But then next, after experiencing stress for a longer amount of time, the hormone cortisol kicks in, and that increases our motivation to eat. So basically, cortisol is like all right, we've been stressed for so long, we're running out of energy being stressed, we're gonna have to eat pretty soon here. So that just increases our motivation to eat. Additionally, it should be noted that we experience a feel-good response to eating. So when we eat, our brain releases dopamine, and we are naturally hardwired to seek out behaviors that release dopamine. Foods that are high in fat, sugar, and salt give the highest dopamine response. So these are usually the type of foods that we turn to when we're feeling very, very stressed. So the cortisol in long-term stress is kicking in, saying we need to eat. Our body's natural tendency is to eat things that are higher in fat and sugar and salt because it gives us that dopamine that we're looking for. So those are the types of foods that we're going to turn to when we're stressed. It's very natural and a super normal tendency. All that to say, when that happens, it's not necessarily a great thing. Even though it's natural, we should try to limit that as much as possible. So as previously talked about, those foods that are high in saturated fats and sugar and salt are generally not the best for our health. So we should avoid eating those even when we're stressed. And how do we do that? So first, we can try to reduce the temptation of healthy foods by taking a walk, just basically getting those foods out of our vision or out of our houses. Having an accountability buddy, so just someone to talk your feelings over with. Preparing snacks ahead of time so that if you do feel the need to eat, you can kind of snack on those healthy options. And then you should also avoid getting very hungry and planning out your meals ahead of time. And that can help kind of alleviate the urge to eat an unhealthy food option and eat a healthy food option instead. And lastly, it's best to just not keep unhealthy snacks in the house, because if they're in the house, you're likely going to turn to them. It's amazing what our bodies biologically have taught us to do. We will seek out those foods because they're going to give us the highest dopamine. And then all of these are really good options to kind of push the food away, but that's not handling the root of the problem. So the root of the problem is the stress that we are experiencing. And we can try to reduce stress as much as possible by exercising. Wellcats has a lot of great exercise videos like Josh was mentioning. Getting enough sleep, meditating and yoga, reducing your caffeine intake, and then also just taking a break from those stressful activities can help reduce that level as much as possible. And then finally, if none of that's working, then seek out some mental health services, see if there's anything that they can do to help, or do all of these things at the same time, and it'll just be a combined reducing stress effort. So combining all of these activities to both reduce the temptation of those foods and reduce stress will hopefully allow us to kind of better follow a healthy eating pattern and not fall victim to our very natural tendencies of eating unhealthy foods. Okay, so some of the other barriers that I was able to identify from a lot of different studies that are available is that people just feel like they have a lack of self-control, and that there's just readily available unhealthy food options, so like that convenience. And then similarly, the lack of healthy access to healthy foods, or the lack of access to healthy foods, sorry, lots of healthies in there. And then also the negative attitudes towards healthy food options, a lack of knowledge and support, limited time to cook and prepare healthy foods, and then a lack of motivation to cook healthy foods as well. These are all barriers that I identified. To overcome those barriers, starting with a lack of self-control and convenience. So for this one, you should avoid letting yourself get very hungry, which means that you should try to plan out your meals and eat snacks throughout the day. Also, to stay full for longer, we should eat foods that have more protein and fiber in our meals and our snacks. Oh, my dog sounds like she's about to bark. Hopefully she doesn't. Oh, there she goes. Next, when there is a lack of access to healthy foods and easy access to unhealthy foods around us, always make sure that we're trying to choose the best options of what are available. Let me mute myself for just a second. Oh man, working at home, it's great. So when you're choosing foods, just read the nutrition facts panel on the back of the foods to determine the level of kind of saturated fats, trans fats, and added sugars that are in that food, and try to choose the healthiest option out of all of those. It's also really helpful to identify healthy food options at restaurants that are available in your local area. Finally, if you have a negative attitude towards specific healthy foods, like vegetables are usually not everyone's favorite, then try to prepare that food in a different way. So cutting it differently, adding different flavor combinations, just preparing it differently, like baking it or grilling it instead of just microwaving it or sauteing it. Those are all really good options to try to reduce that kind of negative feeling towards that food. All right, now moving on to the rest of the barriers. So if you feel like you have a lack of knowledge or support when planning a healthy meal pattern, feel free to schedule an appointment with me and we can talk a little bit more specifically about your needs and concerns. And then next, if you have limited time to cook or prepare healthy meals, meal prepping is a really great option. You can all in one day purchase, wash, and store the foods like the fruits and the vegetables that you'll be needing through the week. And then those can be easily incorporated into meals and snacks. And that kind of reduces the amount of time it's going to take on the day. When it's dinner time, you're really hungry, you don't have any vegetables prepared, you don't want to spend time doing that. So you might opt to a little more unhealthful option. So just preparing the majority of that food ahead of time, having it in the freezer or having it in the refrigerator on a day that you happen to be free, go buy a ton of vegetables, grains and stuff, prepare it, freeze it, and then it's readily available for the rest of the weeks or months. And then finally, if you have a lack of motivation to cook healthy food options, find really quick and easy recipes that are going, and I'm going to give tons of examples of those in just a second, but really quick and easy so that the motivation is not going to be a huge determining factor. All right, so I wanted to give a really quick tip about just how to build a satisfying snack. So when planning a snack, there are two things to consider. First, you need to make a snack that have one of these three components. So either a fat, carbohydrate, or protein. You should have two of those three options. So you can pair fat and carbohydrate together, protein and carbohydrate together, protein and fat together, but make sure it's not just one of those food groups. And then this will ensure that you not only have a satisfying snack, but that you're also going to contribute to your energy levels and not just result in an energy crash later on. And then the snack you choose is something that you can prep ahead of time and then eat on the go at your desk, for example. Alrighty. So these are some really good snack options that I came up with and some that I take advantage of a lot of the time. So things like sliced apples with peanut butter Greek yogurt dip. This is a really good way to kind of fancy up your dip a little bit instead of just eating plain peanut butter. So you mix 3 tablespoons of plain Greek yogurt with 1 tablespoon of peanut butter. It's going to be less calories because you're not eating so much peanut butter, but it's also going to add in like calcium and stuff from that Greek yogurt. So it's going to be overall a lot more healthful, and just dip in those apples and there you go. There's your snack. And then chopped veggies with protein ranch. So this is another one that I like to do. So you mix about half a packet of the dried ranch. So it could be just any of those dry packets of ranch that you can get from the store. You could also add fresh dill if you wanted to. And then you're going to mix that into 1 cup of plain Greek yogurt. I don't know if any of y'all have had plain Greek yogurt, but it tastes pretty similar to sour cream. It's just very tart. And whenever you mix that ranch in, it basically tastes like a delicious ranch dip that you could use for your vegetables. And then you have enough of it to last multiple days. You could also do carrots, cucumbers, and bell peppers with hummus dip, but I will warn, hummus generally is pretty high in sodium. So watch out for that and try to choose the lowest sodium options. And then you could also use Greek or eat Greek yogurt with fruit and granola, but for the granola, watch out for those added sugars. For protein, you could eat protein or snack bars, but again, watch out for those added sugars and choose the most nutrient dense option available and make sure it has a little bit of protein in there as well if you're choosing a snack bar. You could eat just fruits and nuts or nut butters. So pair some almonds with a piece of fruit. There you go. That's a wonderful snack. And then also smoothies, which can be made ahead of time and stored in the fridge. And then these are some convenient meal ideas that I picked off the internet that are going to take, according to the recipes, about 10 to 15 minutes each to prepare. So the avocado egg sandwich looked pretty good if you like egg sandwiches. You just mix an avocado, 3 hard-boiled eggs, some dill, some parsley, a little bit of lemon juice, salt, or you could X the salt if you want. And then olive oil, and then put that in 2 slices of wheat bread. That's going to be very filling. Avocados are extremely high in calories, so it's going to keep you full for a very long time. Same with eggs. That'll actually probably make way more than 1 serving looking at that. So you might want to divide that into 2 sandwiches if you're able to, or just split the serving or all the ingredients in half. And then the fresh hummus wrap looks really delicious. It's going to have turkey, cucumber, hummus, spinach, tomato, just anything that you're eating. Make sure to add tons of vegetables in it, like this one. It looks delicious. And then the grilled Italian tuna melt looks really, really good too. So that's just a can of tuna. And make sure you try to get that can of tuna that's in its water and not in the oil, because that's just going to add a ton of extra calories in there. Put a small onion in it, some chopped green olives, some olive oil based mayonnaise or normal mayonnaise if you want to, some pesto. I thought that was a really good take on a normal tuna melt, lemon, whole wheat bread, mozzarella, etc. That's a really quick and easy meal that you can make. Here's some more. So I'm not going to go over these as specifically, but they are going to be available on the PowerPoints for whoever, on this PowerPoint for whoever wants it. So egg in a mug, I thought this was really interesting. You just basically mix all of these ingredients into I'm guessing a pretty large mug, and then put it in the microwave, and there you go, really quick and easy breakfast. Sweet and savory salad. So this has quinoa, spinach, pecans, blackberries, strawberries. So it has the sweet and then the savory at the same time. And it looks like it has tons of vegetables and fruit in it. And then the vegetarian chili. Speaking of which, I'm going to be making a vegetarian chili tomorrow in the PAN class. So if any of y'all are interested in that one, feel free to attend. But this is also a really good option. Make sure to choose the low sodium beans so that you're not getting too much of that salt in there. And then as well, it's a low sodium broth, but real fast. You basically dump it all in a pot, cook it for about 10 minutes, and it's good to go. Alrighty, so now moving on to techniques for trying new foods. So like I said, that you could prepare them differently, specifically I'm talking more about vegetables here. So you could prepare them differently. You could roast them, you could saute them, air fry them, grill them. You don't just have to kind of boil them or steam them. They can be a lot more delicious if you kind of get that crispiness going on as well. Also, you can try different flavor combinations. So I put together different like spice kind of mixtures that you could either mix up ahead of time or just have all of these on hand. So if you want more of a Latin flavor, a Mediterranean flavor, an Asian flavor, or an Italian flavor, feel free to kind of mix all these things in there, give it really powerful flavor without adding a lot of that extra fat or extra salt as well. Okay, so this is one of our last slides. Other general tips for healthy eating. So make sure that you have at least 2 colorful vegetables present in the recipe or on your plate at all times. So color variety indicates that you're getting a variety of vitamins and minerals in your diet. If there's not a variety on your plate, consider adding things like zucchini, yellow squash, mushrooms, spinach, cauliflower, bell peppers, carrots. So these things generally take on pretty much the flavor of the recipe and don't have a ton of flavor on their own. Well, they do, but not, they're going to take on the flavor very well in a recipe. So definitely add some of those if your meal is not as bright as you would like it to be. Chopping fruits and vegetables at the beginning of a week ensures that they are easily available. I kind of talked about that with meal prepping. And then add 2 types of fruits to your grocery list each week. Those can be fresh or frozen. And then those fruits can be added to yogurt, cottage cheese, cereal, oatmeal, and smoothies as well. Okay, so the goal that I want y'all to kind of set for yourselves is to try a new vegetable this week. And there's lots of vegetables that are in season right now. So the asparagus are in season, broccoli's in season. I think Brussels sprouts are also in season. You might need to check that though. Carrots are, let's see, what else? Oh, those dark greens. So things like kale, collard greens are also in season. So try a new vegetable this week. See what happens. My favorite and the ones that I like to try are the seasonal ones, like I just mentioned, because they're generally cheaper and just for environmental reasons. They're not being shipped as far and they have all those nutrients that they need to have. So that's what I challenge you to do this week. And I think that is it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then answer whatever questions y'all might have. Oh, it looks like we got a lot going on in the chat. Okay, so Erica asked my opinion on Chobani, less sugar Greek yogurt. I'm actually not incredibly familiar with that Greek yogurt. I'd have to look at the nutrition facts panel. I don't know whether it has a sugar substitute in it or whether it just has plain less sugar. I can try to Google it really quickly and look it up for you. All right, high protein, lower sugar. Nutrition facts. Okay. Oh, they're trying to give me a different brand of yogurt here. Okay. Greek yogurt. Well, another question says that it has a lot of protein in it. Chobani, all Greek yogurt has a lot of protein in it, which is fantastic. Show nutrition. It's not showing me the ingredients. It's kind of just showing me the breakdown. It looks like it only has 9 grams of added sugars, or no, 5 grams of added sugars. So that's really not a bad option at all. It does not say whether it is substituting the sugar just for like 0-calorie sugars. I'm not able to find an accurate nutrition facts panel. And that is definitely not a bad thing. If it's subbing some of those sugars for the 0-calorie sweeteners. Oh, look, let's see. Oh yeah, this is the website that I was just on and it's not telling me like the actual ingredient. Oh, there's the ingredients. Nope. That's awesome. It is basically just taking out some of the sugar. So it still has that cane sugar in it, but it only has 5 grams of it. That's really not a bad option at all, especially if you're eating maybe 1 or 2 of those a day. That's not going to get up to those 50 grams anytime soon. That's a good option, and it's high in protein as well. And then another question, I was wondering the same thing about Diet Coke and Coke Zero. So Diet Coke and Coke Zero, those are things that basically subbed out that sugar and added in that 0-calorie sweeteners. The low-calorie sweeteners, like I mentioned, are okay options in the short term, but in the long term, it would be better to kind of sub to things like water with a little bit of the fruit juice in it if possible, or like just things like that. And so that you're not eating so much of the, or not drinking in this case, so much of those low calorie sweeteners, because at this point, we are not 100% sure what those things do. Okay, any other questions? Alrighty, I think we are